So lovely to be here. And I want to say it's always an honor and a privilege to come to this group. And I thought I'd do something different. Normally I come and share on a topic, but this time I thought I'd do a little deep dive on the abandonment wound. So I am going to share a PowerPoint that I've created for you guys. And it would be really great if this is a really quite an interactive session. So I'm really hoping that some of you want to get involved. So because it won't work if you're not being involved, so to speak. So I'm going to start this, and hopefully if you want to add to the session, we're going to do quite a lot of stuff in breakout rooms because it's a big group and I want you guys to get the opportunity to share with each other. So yeah, so I'm just going to crack on. So it's a deep dive into the abandonment wound, and we are going to look at acknowledgement, healing and forgiveness. So first of all, I want to know how does this topic relate to our codependency recovery journey? Anybody got any ideas? Have we got any hands up there? Please put your hand up if you've got an idea, and we can so I'm just going to go into some of the definitions. So the abandonment wound often refers to a deep-seated emotional distress resulting from experience where a person feels left behind, discarded or rejected. Also, it can stem from parental neglect, loss of a loved one, or emotional, physical abandonment in relationships. And we'll talk about the difference. The wound is quite often cumulative, so it contains all the hurt, disappointment, and self-doubt experienced since childhood. And emotional abandonment is the result of a significant person, normally a caregiver, discarding you, dismissing you, devaluing you, or not acknowledging you. This can happen as a result of poor parenting, with parents being too busy or too self-involved to give time for their children, or in families where there is addiction, mental health, or generational dysfunction. The abandonment wound can also be caused by an absent parent. When one of your parents has not been physically or emotionally there for you as a child, the ramifications to your relationship with yourself and others will be a lifelong recovery journey. We may have tried to live our lives before CoDA, to keep going with our self-defeating behaviours, ignoring that wound, but the leakage will be obvious in our lives, but the damage is still the same in terms of what we need to do to heal. Our codependent behaviours are as a result of protecting ourselves from more hurt, so we do not have to go back and feel this original pain. Lifelong consequences. Some of us have parents that were physically present but emotionally not present due to mental health or addiction. This does the same damage to us, whatever the reason we have these issues. Okay, what are some of the other, we've talked about some of the other causes. So the main thing is abuse or neglect. So exposure to behaviors like neglect or abuse in childhood, whether from a parent or an authority figure, can have an impact on our ability to make healthy attachments. It could be a death of a family member, losing a close family member, especially a parent, can be very traumatic. Grief is strongly associated with higher levels of depression, anxiety, and those with fears of abandonment and other attachment issues, we often experience grief at higher, longer levels compared to those with healthy attachment style. Unstable living conditions, poverty can also significantly affect someone's ability to have access to basic necessities, housing, food. Research has found that children raised in poverty are at higher risk of developing anxious attachment styles, which might contribute. Other reasons, birth trauma. Some of us might have had separation at birth, incubators, being dropped off at grandma's house, boarding school, divorced parents, absent parents, sick parent, growing up in an emotionally cold environment where it wasn't safe, childhood abuse, sexual abuse, or verbal insults, even emotionally aloof or distant parents. So what is involved with acknowledging you have this wound? So what do people think? What are some of the ideas? What is involved with acknowledging it? And how does CoDA help with that? So hands up, anybody, what's involved with when we come to CoDA, how to acknowledge? Okay, I'm just going to move on. So look, these are some of the things that I thought acknowledgement, and this is also all part of what we do in CoDA, looking at our family story. And I know for me, when I first came here, I had a lot of stuff, but I didn't, till I listened to people in the fellowship, I didn't understand. There was a lot of denial, you know, and really acknowledging on a deep level what had happened to me. So CoDA really helped me break through my own denial about what had happened. How do we break this denial system? Well, we listen to each other and the penny starts to drop. Oh my God, that happened to me, you know. And also understanding what I experienced as a child wasn't normal. I always thought it was, you know, and I think there's something for me about expanding our understanding on what abuse is, because mine was emotional neglect, and I didn't understand that, you know, emotional neglect does as much damage to a child's brain as any other type of abuse, and how that affects our whole lives. Understanding anything less than nurturing when we're children is considered abuse, you know, and that for me was a real thing that I just hadn't ever got that concept, you know, that things that are, you know, just ignoring a child is enough to damage them. And also looking at attachment theory and what attachment style you are and how that affects your relationship story. So we're going to do a little exercise now. We're going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to have, I'm just looking at the time. So we're going to do just 4 minutes each in the breakout room. And you are going to take 4 minutes to share what happened to you, how it affected you growing up, and where did it show up in your life, this wound, as an adult most. So, my lovely colleague my lovely fellow is going to do the breakout rooms for me. And then we're going to come back together and share, see if there was a similar theme. So we're going to do 12 minutes. So you should have 3 in your group each. So let's end that show. Bring us back a little bit early, just because there's a couple of other exercises I wanted to do. So I just realized that we're quite tight on time. So I'm sorry about that. How did people find that as a group? How was it listening to other people's stories? Could they relate? Were there themes? Did you find it easier to relate to someone else's story rather than your own? I just wanted to know. Do raise your hands and see. Great, lovely. Right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. Share. Okay, so let's go back into this one. Lovely. Okay, whole group discussion. Let's go to the next one. Okay. What are the result of these experiences in terms of how we think about ourselves? What does it do? What messages are we left with this abandonment wound? Anybody? Raise your hand. Oh, I love that. I can so identify. Right. So let's just take a little moment, grab a pen and paper if you've got one, and just write down your core beliefs that you developed as a child to your abandonment. What were the messages that you felt about yourself due to your abandonment? So just even if it's just 3 of those core messages that you received by the emotional neglect or the abuse or the lack of parental love and guidance, how did it make you feel about yourself? What were the core messages you were given? Just take a couple of moments there. And if you have a little look at the PowerPoint, there's a few that stand out for me. These are my ones, you know. I'm not lovable. I've been abandoned. Something must be wrong with me. I always felt like the world isn't safe. I can't trust love. I have to do everything alone. I'm not lovable. I'm only lovable if I'm perfect, if I behave in a certain way. I can't trust anyone as they will always leave me. I will always be checking for these signs in my experiences with others to confirm this belief. So, and then let's do you think we change these core messages, and how does CoDA help us do this? Anybody, what do we do in CoDA that helps us change these messages? Any ideas there? We do. We identify those messages that actually are lies. Those messages are lies. They're as a result of abandonment, and they're the creation quite often of the inner critic. And it's actually our parents' issue. It's not our issue. So it's learning to change those false core beliefs that we developed. So it's about the magical thinking, and we do this in CoDA with our affirmations. So replacing our old beliefs with a new positive one. At every CoDA meeting, we generally finish by the sheet of affirmations, don't we? And to remind ourselves that affirmations must be in the positive, whatever they want to be. So I want you to write down the opposite to your old core messages now into an affirmation. So whatever those three were that you wrote down, I now want you to write down the opposite of your core messages. And to really start to have those as your little mantras. You know, for me, when I first came to CoDA, I really practiced affirming out those old core beliefs and bringing in the new, bringing in the truth, bringing in the positive. Would anybody like to read out their affirmations, what they've written about themselves? Do feel free to unmute and read them out if somebody wants to. Yeah, and hand on the heart. I always do that, like, you know, what am I avoiding? Because when I'm trying to fix somebody or help someone else, I'm generally just abandoning myself, you know, and my need to fix is the level of abandonment that I experienced as a child. Lovely. Oh, love that. Listen, beautiful. So let's, how do the symptoms of the wound show up in our relationships? Give me some of your sabotage patterns that you bring that have come about because of your wound. What are some of the things you bring into the relationship because you've got this wound? What are your worst sabotage patterns? Anybody willing to share? Yeah, great. I'm just gonna, so these are some of the ones: trouble communicating, seeking out reassurance, others won't leave you, constantly getting attention from your partner, finding that you can't trust somebody, jumping from one relationship to another. That was one I used to do. Always sabotaging. I mean, I used to test people because I thought they were all going to leave me, forcing ourselves to stay, having trouble engaging in intimate behaviors, and engaging with abuse, manipulation, or coercive, express frequent or constant anxiety symptoms, that hypervigilant, and suicidal at the end of relationships, and inability to look after ourselves, separation anxiety. So I was going to ask, where do we think, how and when does it get activated? When's the time we most feel the abandonment wound? Hands up. What do people think? How and when does it get activated? No one's mentioned the end of relationships, so that was quite interesting. Extreme emotional pain quite often, and it can have physical symptoms. Unable to eat, sleep, pushed into a trauma response, back to being a child quite often, where it all started. We can have very chronic anxiety and very low mood, almost like depression-like feelings. And this can be triggered by any slight perceived rejection or where we're left out. We're forced back into our original pain we spent our lives running from. We often reenact our past trauma by inviting emotionally unavailable people into our lives. And we have to remind ourselves this is an opportunity for healing. So we're going to do a little breakout room. We're going to do, let's have a look at the time. We're going to go back into our original groups, and we're going to have just 9 minutes, so 3 minutes each. And we're going to talk about how are the end of relationships for you, what happens to you physically, emotionally, spiritually, and how has being in CoDA helped with this? Did we have some common themes in the breakout groups? Anybody want to share? Copy that. Do that. Brilliant. Okay, I'll do that in a moment. Let me Right. Okay. So let's crack on. And I'm sure that there was lots of identification in those groups of, you know, the of how it is at the end of relationships for people, because it is quite often very, very painful, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So how it can play out in our lives. So some of the things I thought is sensitivity to criticism, overreacting to conflict, extreme tendencies, ghosting at the first sign of conflict or extreme outbursts, anxiety and fear of other people leaving, ending relationships early before the person has a chance to leave, jealousy or suspicion that your partner will hurt and cheat you, self-doubt, insecurity, lack of self-worth, staying in abusive relationships and accepting crumbs, and in more extreme cases of being deeply triggered during events such as breakups, divorce, one might feel a total loss of control over their emotions, hyperreactivity, anxiety attacks, fear, insomnia, weight loss and gain, and obsessive thoughts, and suicidal ideation. That's where I go with it. So a little bit more about the wound. It's an invisible wound to the eye, but it leaves telltale signs in how we relate to the external world and how we feel about ourselves and how we behave in relationships. It can leave us spending our whole lives running from a perceived danger to test someone's love like a straw that inevitably breaks, then using their resignation as evidence we're living in an unsafe world. It can cause us to accept the bad behavior of others, ignoring our own needs and preventing us from having our voice in relationships. Their fears that they're being tricked, betrayed, lied to, or deceived surfaces. They're triggered by someone's extension or withdrawal of love. And we have a very hard time trusting, receiving love, and identifying what healthy love looks like. Constantly needing to make ourselves feel safe with people and things. That's what codependency is, really. So we're going to look at now, we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to discuss as a group, one person to write ideas down, what we need to do to heal the abandonment wound and how does CoDA help us heal this wound. So this is going to be a 10-minute exercise and then we're going to come back and discuss those ideas as a group. So just to remind you, what do we need to do to heal this wound and how does CoDA help with this? What do we need to do to heal the abandonment wound and how can CoDA help with that? Ideas, strategies, tools, tips, work that you've done in CoDA that specifically help with this issue. And I think for me, there was always that thing that I was running from myself. I was running from a relationship with me. I didn't know how to go inside and form a healthy, loving relationship with Amanda. So it was like CoDA suddenly got me to stop looking outward and start to go in. You know, that was my main issue. All of that fixing and caretaking others was about my avoidance. And abandonment makes us avoid ourselves. And actually what we need to do and what CoDA does is direct us inwards to that heart space, to that empty, cavernous, you know, space inside to love ourselves. So, yeah. So how was that, guys? What ideas did we come up with? Anybody want to feedback from their group? What are the ideas we need to do to heal from this wound? Anybody want to share with us? Yeah, lovely. Fantastic. Great group. Great lot of ideas. So some of the ones that I came up with was, let's get to move that out of the way. There we go. Okay, we've done this one. Okay, what do we need to do and how? Acknowledge what's happened, which is what CoDA is so good at. Feel the feelings, because I think there's something about, you know, and grieve the losses, you know, and I think the whole of the CoDA journey actually is quite often about grief, about the grief that we couldn't feel, expressing the unfelt feelings of our inner child. For me, there was something around the fact that those feelings needed to be expressed. And for me, for many years in CoDA, it's about the venting of the unfelt feelings that my child couldn't feel, starting the inner child journey, expanding our knowledge as well on what healthy parenting and healthy families and healthy relationships should look like, and then start to give the love we never had to ourselves. So stop abandoning ourselves and stop choosing emotionally unavailable people, and to start becoming our own loving parent. So stop running, stop avoiding the pain and the feelings, stop using other people to fill the wound like plasters. You know, I used to use people like plasters to cover up that wound. Understand about trauma bonding, attachment theory, complex PTSD. Our culture teaches us to swallow our pain and mask it. We learn to stuff all our grief, shame, hurt, and pain into a box and swallow it down. And through CoDA, we start to let that stuff out. Through our relationships, trauma remains in our bodies, even though it's invisible. So we have to acknowledge these deep trauma wounds and start to heal. Pushing down and avoiding will lead to more pain. And all of our codependent behaviors are us running from the pain. So avoiding going within and meeting ourselves. CoDA helps us to understand what healthy relationships look like and start to choose healthier people. So the wound is always unfinished business. So look at your experiences with loving eyes and give space for the darkness to emerge. Unfinished business will always find a way, usually inside our most intimate relationships, to be seen and seek healing. Recognize your innocence and acknowledge that you're wounded at a time when you are most helpless. And since you cannot escape the pain of the past, your only option, if you wish to heal, is to feel all of the grief, all of the sadness, all of the anger, and eventually the forgiveness that accompanies these hurts. And that really is a process. This is the hard bit, but avoiding it and pushing down prolongs the agony as we carry it into the next relationship. You cannot think your way out of the wound. You have to feel your way through it. I think there's something about venting, letting out the pain, shouting in pillows, running through woods. Venting our emotions in CoDA is part of this process, where we witness and acknowledge each other on our inner journeys to meet our wounded inner children and allow ourselves to feel what we've been running from. Feeling those darker emotions is the therapeutic mode of transport to becoming a whole human being again. You can't spiritually bypass and skip these feelings, your anger, rage, or grief, and all of a sudden find yourself in the land of love or forgiveness. So don't rush the forgiveness. Take time to lean into the anger. In this phase of your healing journey, you'll learn to give space to all your emotions, especially the unfelt dark ones. No longer rejecting the pain inside of you, feeling it allows you to integrate the lost parts of yourself and function in a new way. So letting the love in, one of the hardest things to do for someone with an abandonment wound is for us to let the love in. You expose yourself to the risk of being hurt, betrayed, or worse, or abandoned all over again. Learning how to trust others is intrinsically linked in learning how to trust that you're worthy of receiving love or support. If you've been taught that you're lovable in a certain emotional state, most likely happy, content, agreeable, then your growing edge will be to bring your sadness, fears, and vulnerability to CoDA or your partner or a close friend. Bringing your emotions to another person or a CoDA meeting is an act of revealing yourself in a vulnerable way without expectation. This is what we do when we share and meet each other with understanding, love, and compassion. This is an open invitation for a loved one to hold space for you and remind you that you don't have to do anything alone. Our self-survival mechanism is also part of this damage done, and letting another human being soothe us emotionally is also part of the healing. Letting love in by accepting compliments, hugs, and support that might be offered to you by fellow CoDA members, sponsor, or step group. So we're going to do another little breakout rooms, and we're going to talk about how you are letting the love in. How has this changed? How are you in your life accepting help from others and letting the love in? What have you been your penny dropping moments in your CoDA journey through this healing process? So how has this changed through CoDA? So let's just do, let me just have a look at the time. Let's do, so everybody gets to share, or in fact, let's just do that in a whole group. Let's not do it. We'll do the last exercise in the breakout rooms, the forgiveness one. So let's just, who's willing to share on that topic? How has your journey in CoDA helped you let the love in and receive help from other people? Who would like to share on that topic? Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. Let's talk about forgiveness. So, is this easy? Why is it a process? How long does it take? What prevents us from doing it? How easy is it to get stuck at this bit? Anybody willing to share how it's been for them on this forgiveness journey? Anybody? I identify so much. For me, this has been the hardest bit of the program, and I've been in CoDA a long time, and it's definitely a process. And I think I'm, after many years here, sort of at the point now where I'm much more ready than I've ever been. But like a previous speaker, I still experience abuse from my mother, but I'm trying to turn up for her. But and the thing where I put what prevents us from doing it, and I was thinking about that, and I've done a slide in a minute, and I don't want people to be offended, but it's just what's happened for me, and why I've got so stuck in this bit of the program, and why it's been absolutely like, before this point, I couldn't have done it. So, but if we don't forgive, what can happen? I mean, what do people think we can heal without forgiving? We're not gonna do a breakout room. We're just going to discuss this. So, what parts of the CoDA program has helped you to let go and forgive? Anybody want to share on that? I'm just going to move on. So some of the things I thought we can do to help us forgive: realize often our parents only did what was done to them. Ask for God to help us forgive if we're feeling hard-hearted. Work on conscious contact daily to help us to heal and let go. Know our higher power doesn't want us to stay in the anger. Practice the spiritual principles of the program towards our caregivers. Use the steps to keep our expectations low of others and be in a place of humility and surrender. And remind ourselves that nobody owes us anything in our lives, and we're solely responsible for our own happiness. For me, the biggest problem has been the victim coat. This has been my issue, that despite being in CoDA a very long time, I couldn't take the coat off. And it was really, for me, about starting to understand that if I didn't, and I think this is the question that I would say, are you still choosing to be a victim in your story? And how does this hold you back from healing? Because if we are still blaming, we are still in our codependency. So we're still in our disease. And what is making you difficult to forgive? How can love and compassion towards our parents help with this part? So moving on and living in the present. What does this mean to you in relation to this topic? What do people think about moving on and living in the present? What does this mean to you in terms of healing from the abandonment wound? Anybody want to finish? Not letting our story affect the rest of our lives. So for me, it's about letting go of the past and moving forward, and not allowing what's happened to me in the past to keep taking me hostage in the present. So standing in our strength and living and breathing our codependency recovery to continue to release ourselves from the bondage of the past. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to call it a day because we've gone right over on the time. So thank you for having me this evening. I hope you got something from this workshop.